So, what happens when a private citizen decides to sue a sitting judge? Today, we're diving deep into a legal showdown that puts one of the most powerful protections in our entire justice system to the test: absolute immunity. And get this, that is not a line from a movie. That's a real quote from a real judge, said from the bench, on the official court record. He's talking to a defendant about her friend, a private citizen named Rusty Miller, who wasn't even in the room. I mean, wow. The first thing you're probably thinking is, how is that even possible? Can't a judge say whatever they want in court and be immune? And that right there, that is the central question. The biggest hurdle is a legal concept called judicial immunity. To really understand this fight, first, we've got to understand the defense. Let's break down this idea of absolute judicial immunity because it's the giant legal shield that makes this case so incredible. Think of it like a suit of legal armor. It exists for a good reason. We want judges to make rulings based on the law, even unpopular ones, without being terrified, but the losing side is just going to sue them into oblivion. The goal is independence. But is that armor totally invincible? Well, as it turns out, no, it's not. There are ways to get through that armor, but, and this is a huge but, the path to do it is incredibly narrow. There are basically two tiny specific cracks in the shield. Okay, so here they are. The Supreme Court itself carved out these two exceptions. And what's so fascinating about this lawsuit is that it argues the judge's behavior fits into both categories. Now, you only need to prove one of them to beat immunity, but we're going to look at the case for each one. All right, let's tackle the first argument. This one can sound a little strange, right? How can something a judge does inside a courtroom not be a judicial act? Well, it all comes down to the function, what the judge was actually doing at that moment. So here's the sequence of events at the heart of the lawsuit. It starts with an accusation from the bench, claiming Rusty Miller, this guy not even in court, committed a crime. Then it allegedly moves to fabrication, with the judge talking about documents that didn't exist. Then, and this is wild, the hearing apparently just stops so the judge can do his own investigation right there, culminated in him reading Miller's private decades-old arrest history into the public record. So, to figure out if those actions were truly judicial, the court uses this simple two-part test. First, is this the kind of thing a judge normally does? Is it part of the job description? And second, were the people involved interacting with the judge as a judge in a court proceeding? Let's apply that test. First factor, is it a judge's normal function to stop a hearing to investigate a random citizen? The lawsuit says absolutely not. Judges are supposed to preside, not play private detective. Second factor, was Rusty Miller dealing with the judge? Nope, he wasn't even there. He had zero expectation of being part of any court proceeding. So, the argument is the judge's actions fail on both counts. And this argument isn't just pulled out of thin air. It's leaning on a really powerful precedent called Harper versus Merkel. In that case, a judge lost his immunity for having a non-party arrested over a personal beef. The key reason? That person had no expectation they were dealing with the court. The lawsuit here basically says, hey, our case is even stronger than that one. At least the guy in Harper was in the building. Okay, now for the second, totally separate argument. This one says, look, even if you think what the judge did was somehow a judicial act, he still loses his immunity. Why? Because he was acting in the clear absence of all jurisdiction. Now, this is a really important legal difference. Excessive jurisdiction is when a judge has the power to hear a case but just makes a mistake. That's protected by immunity. But absence of all jurisdiction is when a judge acts without any legal authority in the first place. That is not protected. The classic analogy makes this super clear. Imagine a probate judge, someone who only handles wills. If that judge suddenly decides to oversee a criminal murder trial, they're acting without any lawful power at all. It's not just a bad call. They're on the wrong playing field entirely. So the argument here is that, yeah, the judge had jurisdiction over the actual defendant in the case. But the moment he turned his attention to Rusty Miller, he essentially created a brand new, spontaneous, informal trial against a private citizen. And over that citizen, he had zero jurisdiction, absolutely none. He was that probate judge trying a criminal case. So, okay, these legal arguments are fascinating. But why does this one case really matter? Well, this isn't just about one citizen's fight. It's about a much, much bigger question of accountability for the powerful. And this is where we get into the strategy. The lawsuit is very carefully written to paint the judge's actions as intentional and malicious. Why? Because most judicial insurance policies have an exclusion for stuff like that. If the lawsuit can prove this was no accident, the insurance company could refuse to pay. And that means the judge could be on the hook personally for any damages, which creates a ton of pressure.
And what's their proof of that intent? Well, the lawsuit drops another bombshell. It alleges that this same judge and prosecutor knowingly worked together to give an illegal sentence to the defendant in the original case. See what they're doing? They're trying to establish a pattern of willful misconduct, making it way harder for the judge to just say his actions against Miller were a simple mistake.
And that brings us to the final, really powerful question at the heart of all this. When the official systems that are supposed to provide oversight and accountability fail to act, what happens then? Does the responsibility to uphold the rule of law fall to the ordinary citizen? It's a profound thought, and it's what makes this case so much more than just a lawsuit.